Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that honestly feels like it's straight out of a Disney movie, but is actually a deeply fascinating biological reality. We're talking about why wild animals, creatures completely driven by pure, unadulterated survival instincts, will sometimes make the conscious choice to hand over their most precious, vulnerable babies directly into the hands of humans. Okay, let's dive into this with a scenario that perfectly captures this whole mystery. Picture a fisherman out on the water, minding his own business, totally isolated. Suddenly, a wild dolphin appears right next to his boat, nudging something toward him. He leans over the edge and realizes it's a baby dolphin. It's severely tangled in fishing line and barely breathing. And the mother is right there in the water. She isn't attacking, she's just watching, seemingly understanding that this human might be able to help in a way she physically cannot. I mean, this behavior completely defies basic biological self-preservation. Which leads us to this massive evolutionary paradox. Why approach the most dangerous species on the planet? Humans have spent the last 10,000 years hunting, displacing, and completely disrupting basically every single animal ecosystem we've come into contact with. We are the ultimate apex predator. By every reasonable evolutionary metric, an animal should treat us like a stranger holding a chainsaw in a dark alley. So why on earth do they trust us right at the exact moment a life is on a line? Section 1. Trust across the animal kingdom. From feral cats to wild elephants. What we're looking at here isn't just some isolated viral fluke that happens once in a blue moon. This is a repeated pattern showing up across drastically different, completely unrelated species on literally every single continent. And what's so incredible is that different animals build this trust in fundamentally different ways. Cats, for example, use intricate mental maps. They're essentially running an extensive background check on your daily routine to see if you're a threat. Crows take it a step further through sophisticated facial recognition and inherited trust. They can hold a grudge or a loyalty for years and even pass that exact sentiment down to their chicks without the chicks ever meeting you. And then you have elephants, operating on this deep, multi-generational memory where a herd can remember a kind human for over a decade. Let's look closer at those neighborhood cats. If you leave food out on your porch, you might suddenly find yourself enrolled in what we can jokingly call the furry subscription service. Feral cats have a well-documented history of delivering their newborn kittens to specific human porches. They aren't doing this because they think you have magical healing powers or because they want a new best friend. They do it because you passed a month-long unspoken background check. They've watched your habits, realized you're predictable and safe, and their brains have literally reclassified you from potential predator to extension of the colony. And think about dogs for a second. 15,000. That represents the years of domestication that literally rewired dog psychology. Through thousands of years of cooperative care and sharing firesides, dogs permanently filed humans under the category of pack member with thumbs. And what's truly wild is that this soft, slow-building familiarity sometimes bleeds outward into actual wild populations. It produces unusually low fear behavior in wild wolves and foxes that happen to live in areas with long histories of non-threatening human contact. Moving on to Section 2, the mechanics of safe havens. How animals calculate the risk. Now, what's really interesting about this is exactly how animals calculate this risk. They use a cross-species trust algorithm. This isn't random animal behavior or a sudden leap of faith. It's a highly calculated sequence built memory by memory, generation by generation. It operates on a strict biological protocol. Step 1, observe from a distance. Step 2, test for the threat level over multiple encounters. Step 3, mentally classify that specific human as safe. And finally, Step 4, deploy the babies in a crisis. It is an intensely vetted process long before you are ever approached. And they aren't just using their eyes to vet you either. Scent profiling plays a massive role in this algorithm. Humans produce a very specific and, frankly, overwhelming chemical signature. To a wild mammal, you basically smell like a bizarre mix of laundry detergent, sweat, and your questionable fast food choices. But once that incredibly specific human scent profile gets filed in an animal's brain under safe and non-threatening, it can stick in their memory for an absurdly long time. It allows them to recognize you as a safe harbor even if they haven't seen you in months. The biological groundwork for all of this trust is actually already laid out in many species through a concept called alloparenting. This is cooperative infant care by group members other than the biological mother. It's essentially the idea that it takes a village, and it's incredibly common in highly social creatures like primates and cetaceans, just like our dolphin from earlier. If a chimpanzee troop already practices shared babysitting among themselves, extending that deep-seated trust to a long-term, quiet, non-threatening human observer is actually a much smaller cognitive leap than you'd initially think. Which brings us to a genuinely fascinating branch of modern research, the human as safe haven hypothesis. This is the prevailing theory that wild animals can form an actual attachment-style relationship with specific humans, specifically to seek them out during times of high stress. When an animal in a crisis situation runs toward a familiar human, it stops looking like strange, unpredictable behavior. Instead, it looks exactly like a frightened toddler running directly across a playground to a parent for safety. Section 3. Desperation or calculated risk, the harsh reality of survival. To really understand this, we need to strip away some of the magical perception and look at the stark, pragmatic biological reality of what's actually happening out in the wild. Look, we all love the romantic version, the warm and fuzzy idea of a magical cross-species friendship forged in the forest. But the practical version reveals a much colder truth. Often, this incredible behavior is born out of pure desperation, a desperate need for medical triage, and simply the absence of a worse alternative. A mother animal facing a lethal predator might just be drawn to the nearest large, slow-moving, non-predatory shape, which awkwardly but fortunately happens to be us. But why do we so often step up to help? Why don't we just walk away? Well, it comes down to something called the leaky caretaking instinct. Humans are weirdly exceptionally good at recognizing distress signals from completely unrelated species. When we see a vulnerable crying mammal, our own physiological distress responses trigger. Our heart rate shifts, and we instinctively use slow movements, quiet voices, and careful hands. Wildlife easily reads this consistent, comforting body language. Despite our rocky track record with nature, we are one of the only species on Earth that regularly intervenes to choose help over harm for babies that aren't even our own. And the animals absolutely recognize our unique capabilities. This isn't a social call. This is medical outsourcing to specialists. Animals usually bring us their young when there's an entanglement, a deep wound, or a respiratory problem they physically cannot fix with paws or hooves. They are making a deeply impressive cognitive triage decision. They're essentially outsourcing a complex medical task to an entity in their environment that has demonstrated the dexterity and the ability to fix that exact problem. It is a stunning display of animal intelligence. Finally, Section 4, an evolutionary report card, what this behavior says about us. Let's turn the lens back on humanity for a moment and see how this builds a picture of our ongoing relationship with nature. This baby-delivering behavior doesn't just happen everywhere. The animal populations willing to approach humans share very specific, measurable traits. They live in areas with lower hunting pressure, lower habitat conflict, and a long, stable track record of coexistence rather than competition. In a strange and beautiful way, these interactions act as an informal report card on how well humans in a given region have been behaving toward the local wildlife. And this brilliantly illustrates how every interaction acts as a tiny data point in an evolutionary ledger we don't even know we're contributing to. None of this is magic. Every single time you move slowly around a wild animal in your backyard, every time you leave a bowl of fresh water out for a stray, every quiet, gentle response you offer to something frightened, you are adding a positive data point to this grand ledger. And every once in a while, when the stakes are at their absolute highest and a parent is desperate, that ledger gets cashed in, and a human ends up holding a baby dolphin or untangling an injured calf. So the crucial point is this final thought. In a world with every reason to fear us, are we proving we're worth the risk? These baby-delivering moments aren't just wholesome viral internet videos. They're fragile, immensely valuable proof that despite our messy, complicated history, we can still build a profound trust with the natural world. It is a trust that takes generations to build, and one we must be incredibly careful never to break. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I hope it makes you look at the wildlife in your own neighborhood just a little bit differently.